I want to talk directly to you today, like right where you are listening to this.
Yeah, wherever that might be.
Right, whether you're sitting in traffic or, taking a walk or just staring at the ceiling. I want to talk about that exact moment in life. And if you haven't hit this wall yet, well, you will when you just get tired.
Oh, man, yeah. That is a very specific kind of tired.
It really is. And I don't mean physically tired, right? Like where a good night's sleep or a weekend off will fix it.
hmm
I am talking about a bone-deep existential exhaustion.
Like you just can't take another step.
Exactly. You get tired of waiting for someone to swoop in and save you. You get tired of, desperately needing people to understand your perspective. You just get exhausted from depending on love, on approval, on attention.
Just getting that exact right amount of validation.
Right, just to feel marginally okay inside your own skin for another 24 hours. It's an incredibly heavy burden to carry.
It really, really is.
And it's one that we rarely admit we're carrying, right up until the sheer weight of it finally brings us to our knees.
Well, it's interesting because it really is a universal turning point, that specific kind of exhaustion you're talking about.
Yeah.
But the crucial shift happens when you realize that this profound tiredness, it isn't a sign of failure or a sign that you're broken.
Which is how it always feels, though.
Oh, completely. It feels like you're failing at life, but it's actually the prerequisite for a massive internal shift. To understand how that shift happens, though, we really have to look at the mechanics of why we get so exhausted in the first place.
Okay, lay it on us.
So we have all been culturally conditioned, like practically from birth, to look outward for internal peace.
Right.
We operate under this unconscious blueprint that basically says, if we feel empty, we need to go acquire something, a relationship, a certain status, a specific reaction from someone else.
Just to fill that void.
Exactly. And the goal of our deep dive today is to completely dismantle that conditioning, and we'll look at what happens when you flip the script.
Because today's deep dive, it's really a mission. We are unpacking a set of sources that essentially act as a roadmap from this state of agonizing emotional dependence, right, into a state of true inner freedom.
Yeah, which is a massive claim.
It is. But we are looking at what actually happens when you finally stop asking the outside world to fix what is happening inside you. So let's just jump right into the core premise here, which completely reframes how we view our own pain.
Let's do it.
So the overarching theme across all the material we're looking at is that your suffering isn't actually caused by life itself.
Right, which sounds totally counterintuitive at first.
Right.
But when you really break down the mechanics of human pain, you see this very distinct pattern. Like, we typically operate under the assumption that life events directly cause our emotional pain.
Because it feels that way.
Of course it does. It's a very simple linear view of the world, right? Like, life does something bad, therefore we feel bad. But the sources make a really sharp distinction here. The suffering doesn't come from the event itself.
Okay, so where does it come from?
It comes from the internal demand that life should match our fears and our preferences. It comes from inner resistance.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like you wanted a relationship to stay the same forever. Or you wanted a specific career trajectory to go exactly your way. You wanted a messy, chaotic, completely unpredictable universe to perfectly align with the fearful voice inside your head.
So we essentially walk around demanding that the universe cater to our insecurities.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
Like we have this subconscious script running that's just, if you just behave the way I need you to, I won't have to feel anxious today.
Exactly.
But that is a totally rigged game. When I was going through the notes for this, I kept picturing this scenario, right?
Mm-hmm.
Imagine you are driving a car and the fuel gauge on your dashboard dips to empty.
Okay, I'm with you.
And that little orange warning light comes on. You start panicking because obviously you're afraid of being stranded. But instead of pulling over and, putting gas in the tank, you grab a jerry can and start pouring gasoline directly onto the dashboard.
Oh, wow. Just right over the steering wheel.
Right over the plastic gauge itself. You are trying to fix an internal indicator by manipulating the surface of the machine. You're applying the fix to the entirely wrong place.
I love that. That analogy perfectly illustrates the cognitive dissonance we live with. Because we genuinely believe that if we can just arrange the external variables correctly,
like getting the perfect job.
Right, if we get the ideal job, or if we find the exact right partner, if we secure a very specific type of affection, then the quote-unquote fuel gauge will finally read full, and the internal anxiety will just magically disappear.
But it doesn't.
No, of course not. So, like someone pouring gas on a dashboard, we spend decades reaching outward. We cling to people emotionally. We become entirely dependent on, how our coworkers perceive us.
Or how our friends respond to our texts.
Exactly, or how our spouses anticipate our needs.
But let's dig into the why of that for a second. Because why is our default setting to pour gas on the dashboard? It feels so counterintuitive when you say it out loud, but literally every single human being does it.
Yeah, it's practically universal. And it all comes down to how the brain perceives safety.
Okay.
The mind builds these attachments because, on a really primal level, it equates external predictability with survival.
Wait, like physical survival?
Yes, literally. If the people around me approve of me, I am safe in the tribe. If I can control my environment, I won't be caught off guard by a predator.
Wow, so it goes way back.
Way back. The brain tells you, I cannot be okay without this person or this job or this outcome because it is treating psychological discomfort as a literal physical threat to your life.
That's so intense.
It is, but the irony, and I guess the ultimate tragedy of this mechanism, is that the more you psychologically need something outside of yourself to feel safe, the more suffering it creates within you.
Well, yeah, because life is fundamentally characterized by change.
Exactly. The foundational rule of the universe is entropy and change. I mean, nothing remains static.
Right, people evolve, feelings fluctuate.
Economies crash, health changes. When you attach your core sense of okayness, like your baseline psychological survival, to something temporary and external, you just automatically generate a baseline of chronic fear.
Because you're trying to freeze time.
Yes, you become terrified of loss, of abandonment, of rejection.
Which means you basically have to become a control freak just to survive the day.
Pretty much.
I mean, if my internal safety depends entirely on you liking me, I can't just be myself, right? I have to constantly manage your opinion of me.
You're walking on eggshells.
Exactly. I have to control how I present myself, curate my image, monitor your moods, and adjust my behavior so you don't get mad at me. It's an exhausting, hyper-vigilant way to live.
And it never really works anyway.
Right. And because life simply does not obey these inner demands, we are in a constant state of friction. The more you resist the natural movement of life, the more pain you experience. So if we are constantly manipulating the outside world just to feel safe inside our own skin, this has to completely warp how we interact with other people.
Oh, it fundamentally distorts human connection. And this is where the material we're looking at gets incredibly confronting.
Yeah, it really doesn't pull any punches here.
No, it doesn't. If we follow this logic, we have to look really closely at how we define love. There is a stark, uncompromising distinction drawn in the text between attachment and love. The core argument is that attachment is not love.
Okay, deep breath.
Yeah, attachment is simply fear disguised as love.
Okay, I have to stop you there. I really want to push back on this on behalf of anyone listening who has ever cared deeply about someone.
Fair enough, go for it.
Because the premise here is that we mistakenly assume emotional attachment and suffering in relationships are natural and normal. But aren't they?
Wow.
I mean, if you really love someone, say a partner you've been with for 10 years, if they suddenly leave you or if they just start ignoring you, isn't it just human nature to be devastated?
Yes.
Doesn't the depth of the pain prove the depth of the care? You can't just write off grief or heartbreak as some kind of ego trip. That just feels really reductive.
I hear you. But it's not about writing off grief. Grief is a very natural human response to loss. But we have to look much deeper at the actual mechanics of the devastation you're describing.
Okay, walk me through it.
The emotional collapse you experience when you are ignored, or, the panic you feel when a partner pulls away.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't actually a measure of your love for that person.
It's not.
No. It is a sign that your mind has become attached, fearful, and dependent on them for your own equilibrium. Let's break down how that works.
Okay.
Attachment is the constant inner demand that life, and in this case another person, must behave according to your preferences for you to feel okay.
Mm-hmm.
It is centered entirely around the self.
Right.
When the mind is attached, it is constantly calculating, what am I getting out of this? How am I being treated? Am I important enough to them? Am I loved enough?
So you're saying attachment is fundamentally transactional. It's about securing a resource.
Precisely. Attachment controls, whereas love allows.
Oh.
Yeah. When you depend on someone to define your worth, you are not actually loving them. You are using them.
That is harsh. But
It's harsh.
I see it.
It is harsh, but it's true. You are using them to regulate your own internal fears. And that dependency becomes a psychological prison for both of you. The person who is attached feels constant anxiety about losing the resource.
Right. The clinging.
Right. And the person being clung to feels the suffocating weight of being responsible for someone else's emotional state.
But wait, let's play this out a little more. Let's say my partner comes home and tells me they're leaving.
Yeah.
I'm going to be crushed. How do you separate the love part from the attachment part in that specific moment? Because they feel identical in the body.
They feel identical because we have fused them together culturally. But look at the internal dialogue during that heartbreak.
Okay.
The grief of love says, I will miss you, and I am sad that this beautiful thing is ending.
Right.
The panic of attachment says, how could you do this to me? I am nothing without you. I will never find anyone else. I have wasted my life.
Yeah. Wow.
Do you see the difference there?
It's a huge difference.
The first is a natural sadness about the changing nature of life. The second is an absolute collapse of the ego and a terror of survival. Our sources illustrate this dynamic perfectly by pointing out how people live their everyday lives, right? Like, someone speaks kindly to them and they feel instantly elevated.
On top of the world.
Right, but then someone ignores them and they just collapse internally. A single compliment makes them feel valuable, and a single rejection makes them question their entire self-worth. Their whole emotional world is just being jerked around by external events.
It's like being a puppet on a string. And you've basically handed the strings to whoever happens to be walking past you that day.
Yes, that is exactly what it is.
And the argument here is that that isn't love. That is just fear masquerading as devotion. True love, according to this roadmap we're exploring, it doesn't imprison the heart. It flows freely.
Exactly.
You can love people without losing yourself in them. You can appreciate relationships without depending on them for your identity.
And this redefines our entire concept of emotional strength. We usually think of strength as, the ability to impose our will on the world.
Yeah.
To control our circumstances so we never get hurt.
Or to build walls so thick that no one can get in.
Right, the whole I don't need anybody thing. But that's just a heavily armored form of fear. True strength is redefined here as the ability to remain open even when life changes unexpectedly.
Remaining peaceful regardless of what happens.
Yes. True strength is remaining peaceful within yourself regardless of what the world does. You can experience a loss without collapsing internally because your foundation is built inside yourself, not on the inherently unstable ground of external conditions.
Okay, conceptually that sounds incredible. It sounds like true freedom.
It really is.
But practically, it
Yeah.
sounds nearly impossible.
Well, it takes work, yeah.
Right, because if attachment is caused by this primal, fearful brain that is desperately trying to protect itself from perceived threats, how do you actually stop it? You can't just tell your brain to stop being afraid.
No, you definitely can't.
So we have to figure out who is actually in charge up there in our heads. Which brings us to a concept that completely flips our understanding of identity, which is unmasking the inner narrator.
This is the crux of the whole transformation. If you want to stop pouring gas on the dashboard, you have to understand the machine you're operating.
The brain.
Exactly. We are asked by the text to simply observe what happens inside our minds every single day. There is a constant, unyielding stream of thoughts. From the second you open your eyes in the morning to the second you fall asleep, there's a voice talking.
Oh yeah, it never shuts up.
Right. It complains about the weather. It judges the way someone looked at you. It worries about a meeting next week. It replays some random embarrassment from 10 years ago. It is reacting continuously.
And the staggering thing here is that most people spend their entire lives deeply, unconsciously identified with this noise.
Totally merged with it.
They assume the voice is who they are. If the voice says, I am a failure, they believe they are a failure. But here is the pivot, and this is the core of it. If you can hear the voice, then the voice can be you.
It is the ultimate exercise in cognitive diffusion.
Right, because logically, there is the entity that is speaking like, the neurological process generating the thoughts, and there is the entity that is aware of the speaking.
The observer.
You are the awareness behind the noise. You are the space in which the thoughts are happening. When I first grasped that, it felt like stepping out of a crowded, claustrophobic room. You realize you don't actually have to agree with everything your brain spits out.
It's a huge relief.
Right.
And this realization is the mechanism for stepping out of suffering. We talked earlier about the mechanics of human pain. Most pain does not come directly from life itself. It comes from our unconscious identification with our thoughts and emotions.
Walk us through how that works in real time.
Sure. Let's trace the sequence of a typical reaction. Something happens externally. Let's say a coworker criticizes a project you worked on.
Ouch. Oh.
Immediately, the mind creates a story around it. The inner narrator instantly fires up and says, they think I'm incompetent. I'm gonna get fired. Everyone knows I'm a fraud.
Viral city.
Total spiral. Then your physical body reacts to that story. You feel shame, your heart rate spikes, your chest gets tight. You completely merge with the thought, treating it as absolute, undeniable reality. You become trapped inside a psychological experience generated entirely by a false narrative.
You believe you are the thought.
Exactly.
But the reality is that thoughts are simply mental events passing through consciousness. They are neurological weather, which is the exact analogy used in our sources to explain this.
It's a great analogy.
The mind is like the weather. Sometimes it's stormy, sometimes it's calm, sometimes there is total confusion and fog, sometimes there is absolute clarity.
But just as the sky itself remains completely untouched by the changing weather, there's a deeper part of you that remains untouched by the movement of thoughts and emotions.
The awareness.
Right, that deeper part is awareness. The sky doesn't panic when a thunderstorm rolls in. It doesn't try to push the clouds away. It just holds the storm until it passes. Healing begins when you stop trying to control every single thought and instead learn to just be the sky, to observe the mind without becoming entangled in it.
But our instinct is always to fight the weather, isn't it?
Oh, always.
Most people spend their lives in a brutal wrestling match with their own minds.
Yeah.
We try to suppress negative thoughts. We try to force ourselves into toxic positivity, repeating affirmations we don't even believe. We get angry at ourselves for feeling sad.
We judge the judgment.
Right. But fighting the mind just feeds it. The psychological reality is that what you resist persists. So the goal isn't to destroy the ego or force the mind to be quiet, which is impossible anyway.
Good luck trying to force the mind to be quiet.
Exactly. The goal is to stop identifying with it.
There is an enormous physiological difference between having a fearful thought and believing that you are fear.
Say more about that.
Well, an angry emotion might move through your body, right? Your nervous system gets activated, adrenaline pumps, but that doesn't mean anger defines your identity. These are temporary energies. The problem is that we cling to them. We grab onto a passing thought and build an entire identity structure around it.
Okay, let's talk about the second analogy used for this because I want to challenge it a bit.
All right, I'm ready.
The concept is to imagine you are sitting beside a river watching leaves float by on the surface of the water. Thoughts are just leaves. When you see a leaf float by, you don't dive into the freezing river and chase it downstream. You just sit on the bank and watch it pass.
Right.
But internally, we dive in after every single leaf. A memory from 5 years ago floats by, and suddenly we dive in, our heart gets heavy, and we're swimming in regret.
Yeah, we exhaust ourselves swimming in the current of our own mental activity. The existential exhaustion we talked about at the beginning of the deep dive, that bone-deep tiredness, comes directly from this non-stop psychological involvement.
But here's my pushback on the river analogy. Watching leaves is easy. It's a nice, serene image.
Sure.
But what if the thought floating down the river isn't a leaf? What if it's a memory of a deep trauma? What if it's an overwhelming fear about a medical diagnosis? That's not a leaf. That's a toxic waste barrel. Or a boulder.
That's a very fair point.
I can't just sit on the bank and watch that. My body reacts. The amygdala hijacks my brain, my cortisol spikes, and I feel like I'm drowning whether I jumped in or not.
How does being the observer help when the thought feels like a literal threat to your survival?
That is the essential question here. And it's where the practice has to move from intellectual understanding to somatic reality.
Somatic meaning in the body.
Right, in the body. When a boulder floats down the river, as you put it, your nervous system interprets it as a literal threat. You experience what psychologists call an amygdala hijack.
Fight or flight.
Exactly. In that moment, cognitive diffusion, just telling yourself, I am not my thoughts, it often isn't enough because the body is already in a state of high alarm. Exactly.
Right.
You can't outthink a panic attack.
No, you absolutely can. So the practice shifts. Instead of trying to detach from the thought, you bring the awareness into the physical body. You become the observer of the sensation.
Okay.
You notice the tightness in the chest. You notice the shallow breathing. You observe the physical manifestation of the fear without adding a narrative to it.
What about the story?
Exactly. The mind will want to scream, "We are in danger because of X, Y, and Z." But the observer simply notes, "There is a strong sensation of heat in my chest. My heart is beating rapidly." By observing the physical sensation without judgment, you are signaling to your nervous system that you are safe enough to simply feel the feeling.
So you aren't suppressing the boulder.
No, but you aren't letting it drag you under either. You are allowing it to exist in the river until the current naturally carries it away.
You essentially stop fighting the physical reality of the emotion, which strips it of its secondary layer of suffering the story.
Yes. You start to see that the mind produces thoughts naturally, just like the heart produces a heartbeat or the stomach digests food. You don't panic about a heartbeat. You don't try to control your digestion.
Hopefully not.
Right. So similarly, you don't have to panic about a fear-based thought. You simply observe it.
Okay, but here is the catch that makes this so incredibly difficult. Creating this space, learning to sit on the riverbank, or learning to observe the physical sensations of a boulder without jumping in jet. It requires practice.
A lot of practice.
And the only place where we are truly forced to practice this is in solitude. Which brings us to perhaps the most confronting realization of this entire exploration.
Which is?
Human beings are absolutely terrified of silence.
Oh, yes. Yes, we are. It is confronting because it exposes exactly how much energy we expend running from ourselves. One of the greatest unacknowledged fears human beings carry is the fear of being alone with their own minds.
It's so true.
People will tolerate astonishing levels of misery, deeply unhealthy relationships, chronic emotional suffering, blatant disrespect from peers, and endless inner conflict simply because the alternative, facing themselves in silence, feels too terrifying.
We see this everywhere. We surround ourselves with constant, unyielding stimulation.
Yeah, the screens.
The second we wake up, we check our phones, we have music on in the car, podcasts on while we do the dishes, a screen in front of us until we pass out. We're perpetually scrolling, consuming, distracting. But why?
Well,
I mean, structurally, why is sitting in a quiet room so agonizing for the human brain? We search desperately for someone or something to fill the emptiness, but what is that emptiness actually? Why does silence hurt?
this is where we get a profound psychological insight from the text. Loneliness is not created by being alone. Loneliness is created by being disconnected from yourself.
Wow.
You can be surrounded by a massive group of friends at a party and feel a crushing sense of emptiness. Conversely, you can be sitting in complete solitude in a cabin in the woods and feel a profound sense of connection and peace.
So it's an inside job.
Always. The variable isn't the presence of other people, it is the presence of inner connection.
So silence itself isn't the enemy, it's just the environment.
Silence is merely the mirror. The moment silence appears, the mind becomes incredibly restless. Thoughts race, emotions rise to the surface, old fears appear, unresolved pain from decades ago emerges.
Everything you've been running from.
Exactly. When you are constantly distracted by work, social media, or relationship drama, that noise acts as a dampener. It covers everything up. But in solitude, the dampener is removed and the inner world becomes visible. The discomfort you feel in a quiet room is not caused by the room.
Right.
It is not caused by the solitude. The discomfort is caused by the unresolved energy and the buried psychological patterns that were already stored inside your nervous system. Solitude just brought them to the surface.
Okay, so let's apply this to a regular Tuesday afternoon. Because these concepts are massive, but they have to translate to the mundane moments of life. Let's say I'm sitting in my car, waiting to pick someone up, and I have 10 minutes of unexpected silence. No phone, no radio. The anxiety starts creeping in. If I can't reach for a distraction, what actually happens? Because right now, when we run from this discomfort, when we refuse to sit with our own emptiness, we carry that unresolved energy into every interaction we have.
Oh, without a doubt.
We blindly react to our coworkers. We constantly seek validation from our partners. We're basically demanding that everyone around us act as a buffer against our own internal noise.
Exactly. We use other people as human pacifiers.
Human pacifiers, I love that, and hate that at the same time.
It's brutally accurate, isn't it? We use them to regulate a nervous system. We refuse to regulate ourselves. And the stark warning from our sources here is that avoiding inner discomfort never heals it. It only guarantees it remains buried.
And it festers.
Yes. And that buried pain dictates your life from beneath the surface. It shapes your career decisions, your reactions and arguments, your baseline self-worth. If fear and emptiness exist within you unresolved, you will inevitably carry them into every relationship you enter.
Which explains so much about dating patterns.
Totally. That is exactly why people often repeat the same emotional suffering with entirely different partners over and over again. The faces change, the circumstances change, but the internal patterns remain exactly the same because the internal environment was never addressed.
So how do we break that cycle in the car on a Tuesday? What is the actual mechanism of healing the emptiness?
The mechanism is presence, pure, unadulterated presence. When the anxiety or the sadness rises up in that quiet car, instead of grabbing your phone or turning on the radio or calling someone to complain about your day, You just sit with it.
You just feel it.
You don't run. You don't try to analyze why you feel anxious. You don't judge yourself for feeling sad. You just let the sensation unfold in your body while you act as the silent observer. You allow the energy to exist.
That sounds simple, but so hard.
It is hard, but what you will find, and this is neurologically backed, by the way, is that emotions have a natural life cycle. They rise, they peak, and if they are not fed by a continuous mental narrative, they dissipate. When you watch without resisting, the false layers of identity, the accumulated fears, they naturally begin to dissolve.
You just let the weather pass without trying to control the sky.
Precisely. Healing requires awareness, and awareness grows strongest in stillness. As you practice this in small moments, in the car, in the shower, before falling asleep, something remarkable happens to your baseline state of being.
What happens?
You begin to realize, on a visceral level, that you no longer need the world to rescue you from your own mind. You stop expecting your partner to constantly maintain your emotional balance. You stop needing your boss to validate your worth. Your center of gravity shifts entirely inward. And from that inner stability, your relationships actually become healthier, more resilient, and more joyful. Because you are finally relating to people from a place of wholeness instead of a place of desperate emptiness.
You stop using people to escape yourself.
Exactly.
That is so incredibly powerful. It changes the entire paradigm of how we connect. It brings us to the ultimate conclusion of this roadmap we've been following today. The deepest, most enduring, and most critical relationship you will ever have is not with a romantic partner or a lifelong friend or a mentor. It is with your own consciousness.
It really is.
When you no longer need the external world to behave perfectly for you to feel peace, the emptiness you've been running from disappears entirely.
Because the peace you are relentlessly searching for in other people, in achievements, and in external validation,
Oh.
it was never out there to begin with. It was always located internally, just buried beneath the unexamined noise of your own mind.
Okay, let's take a breath and synthesize the journey we've taken in this deep dive, because it is a massive paradigm shift.
It's a lot to take in, for sure.
It is. We started with the exhaustion of seeking validation, realizing that we have to stop asking the outside world to fix our internal fuel gauge. We have to stop pouring gas on the dashboard.
Right.
Second, we deconstructed our relationships, learning the vital difference between fearful, controlling, transactional attachment and true, allowing, open-hearted love.
Which is a tough pill to swallow, but necessary.
Definitely. Third, we explored the mechanics of the mind, stepping back to become the silent observer, the sky watching the mental weather, the awareness witnessing the river of thoughts without drowning in them.
Yeah.
And finally, we confronted our fear of silence, learning to stop running from solitude and instead embrace it as the ultimate crucible that reveals our inherent wholeness.
It is a profound, comprehensive roadmap to inner freedom.
Yeah.
And to build on everything we've explored today, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your week.
Oh, I'm ready for this.
If we accept that true healing begins by not needing the external world to change in order for us to feel internally okay, consider this perspective shift. What if the people and the situations that trigger your emotional dependence the most, the coworker who infuriates you, the partner who triggers your anxiety, the family member who makes you feel small, what if they aren't actually obstacles to your happiness?
Okay, if they aren't obstacles, what are they?
What if they are a custom-designed curriculum pointing exactly to the specific internal attachments and fearful patterns you are finally ready to observe, process, and outgrow?
Framing the triggers as the curriculum. The very things that drive us crazy are the exact things showing us where we are still unfree. I love that. So as we sign off, your homework for today is simple in theory, but incredibly challenging in practice.
Good luck, everyone.
Right? Find a moment today. Take a few minutes to just sit quietly without a screen, without a distraction. Let the mental weather roll in. Feel the discomfort if it arises. Watch the leaves float by on the river. Breathe deeply. And remember what this exploration makes so clear. You are never fundamentally broken. You are only ever disconnected from yourself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Take care of yourselves.